just thought that I would do a quick old-fashioned video log concerning The Chosen. I am reminded of what Hemant Mehta said: nobody cares about your boring Jesus show. Hemant Mehta is the friendly atheist. He has a blog on Only Sky Media, and he also has a YouTube channel. But I actually love Jesus shows. I love Jesus Christ Superstar, and I binge watched Roma Downey's Jesus show. I think it was The Bible Continued, AD, The Bible Continued, and I actually thought that was very good. And there's actually an Irish actress, was it Charlene McKenna, who was in it. She lives close by here in Ireland, and I like that show. I thought that Saint Peter was played extremely well, and I didn't like that the show didn't continue. The show ends on a cliffhanger with Pontius Pilate's wife being thrown in prison, and that is where the show stops. Unfortunately, it wasn't continued. I like Jesus shows. I'm trying to think of another Jesus show that I watched. I can't think of any at the moment. I haven't watched The Passion of the Christ in a while, but I suppose even the last time that I watched it, it's probably more than 10 years ago now, but yeah, there are a lot of criticisms about that film. It's gratuitous violence and stuff like that, and all these criticisms are valid, but even that, I've watched The Passion of the Christ several times, and I wasn't bored by it at all. However, I was extremely bored by The Chosen. I watched one episode and that was enough. I might have watched two, but I would just like to discuss a few things about the show that I didn't like. One of the things, in the beginning, we are introduced to a famous rabbi called Nicodemus. Nicodemus, as far as I am aware, is only mentioned in the Gospel of John. I have Alexa here, and I might get her take on it. Alexa, does Nicodemus appear outside of the Gospel of John?
From thebibleartist.com. There are no mentions of Nicodemus in Scripture outside of the Gospel of John.
Thanks, Alexa. And so Alexa here confirms, this is unscripted, so I just wanted to I'm too tired to write a script or to make a thumbnail or to go into StreamYard or to go into Microsoft PowerPoint, so I just want to do an old-fashioned talk to the camera video log. So Nicodemus is only mentioned in the Gospel of John, according to Alexa. Not even in the epistles is he mentioned. There are no references to Nicodemus outside of the Gospel of John. In my view, he's a fictional character. That's one thing about the Gospel of John. It introduces to us a whole new cast of characters like Nicodemus and Lazarus. Lazarus is a fictional fellow in the Gospel of Luke. He appears in parable, but then John takes this Lazarus and makes him real, and has a totally opposite message. The message of Lazarus in the Gospel of Luke is, Abraham, with God's power, he is not going to raise somebody from the dead so as to preach to Dives, the rich man's rich brothers, because they have the scriptures, they have Moses and the prophets. If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, what good will it do them to rise up a man from the dead? John reads this and says, maybe we should raise up somebody from the dead so as to witness to the Jews. And so Christ rises up Lazarus. And I think that this is the motive that the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, have for wanting to kill Jesus after this. So Lazarus likewise is a fictional character. So Nicodemus, fictional character, never existed, but that's what really the Chosen opens with. And I think that we are meant to be impressed by this rabbi, this ancient Jewish rabbi. Really, he's a witch doctor with an outmoded pre-scientific belief system, but I think that we are meant to be impressed by his knowledge of the scriptures and of the oral law and all of this, but I'm not impressed by this at all. And Nicodemus is also an exorcist. He tries to exorcise Mary Magdalene and can't, but then Jesus shows up and exorcises Mary Magdalene. So Jesus has more magic, demon expelling powers than Nicodemus. And I think that we, the audience, are meant to be impressed by this. Jesus is more magical than Nicodemus, but I'm not impressed. And it goes back to Hammett Meta. Unless you actually believe in Jesus and his supernatural abilities, you aren't going to be impressed by this. In the other Jesus shows, the narrative is sufficient to carry us along. In Superstar, I think it was written by two atheists, or at least agnostics, and if you actually read, what you should do is go on to Genius and actually read the lyrics. Jesus is actually the bad guy in that show. And that's very interesting. This is why Tim Minchin, who's another atheist, he loves Jesus Christ Superstar as well, and he wanted to play Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, and he did. In Jesus Christ Superstar, you don't have to believe in Jesus to find the narrative compelling. However, I think that in The Chosen, unless you believe in Jesus, there's really nothing here to maintain your interest. So Nicodemus is a fictional character, and one thing that Bart Ehrman points out is that Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus, in which he says, you must be born again, or in the KJV, you must be born again. I remember going up to Northern Ireland and you'd see this KJV verse in like Old English. On Windows, I think it's called Old English font. It's like this gothic type, and it looks really sinister. Ye must be born again. That's how the Northern Irish Protestant fundamentalists would probably say it. So, yes, but Bart Ehrman points out that this is punning in Greek. The Greek prefix "ana" can mean either again or from above. We have words like anathema, anathema or anathema. It's placing something above so as to be destroyed. I think that's the etymology of anathema, something placed up so as to be destroyed. So the prefix ana can mean, in Koine Greek, it can mean either above or again. So Jesus is punning in the Greek. He says to Nicodemus, "You must be born again." And Nicodemus says, how can I be born again? One is born from his mother's womb, and then he's never born again after that. But Jesus punning, what he really means is you must be born from above. Must be a spiritual birth. And Bart Ehrman points out that this pun only works in Greek, the language that this gospel was written in. If Jesus actually existed, and if Nicodemus actually existed, they would be talking in Aramaic, not Greek, and this pun does not work in Semitic languages. So Nicodemus, in my view, is a fictional character, and The Chosen begins with this fictional character, and I think we are all, especially people who believe in this stuff, they watched this thinking that this Nicodemus character actually existed, but he didn't. And another thing, nobody seems to be calling out The Chosen for stuff like this. Jenkins met the Pope. Jenkins met Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen. He met James Martin. I think James Martin is an accomplished scholar. I'm pretty sure he knows that Nicodemus couldn't have existed. Does he call out presenting fictional characters as though they were real in this show? Does he call that out? I don't think so. Nobody seems to be calling stuff like this out. And another thing in The Chosen, and I think the people behind this show are hucksters. Another thing about The Chosen is we have Jesus going about with the evangelists, and it's as though the evangelists are working for the Daily Planet. They're there and they're taking notes, during the lifetime of Jesus. And it's the traditional authors, so Jesus is going about with Matthew, and Matthew's writing stuff down. John is interviewing witnesses. It's really bizarre stuff, and of course none of this happened. And even Father Casey is a Catholic priest. He has a show called Back in the Habit, and even he criticised this. This is nonsense. The Gospels were written down beginning 30 years after Jesus died. So, there were no people, there was no press pack around Jesus scribbling this stuff down whilst Jesus was still alive. As Bart Ehrman says, what probably happened is that after Jesus died, there was an oral tradition for about 30 years in Aramaic, and then beginning with Mark, Greek scholars began to write this oral tradition down. So that's what true Bible scholars are saying. However, this show is promoting the belief that fictional characters like Nicodemus are real, and they are promoting traditional authorship, and an extremely bizarre form of traditional authorship. I think that most people who promote traditional authorship, they say that 30 years after Jesus died, then the traditional authors began to write down what Jesus was doing. But this show, it's bizarre. Like the traditional authors are writing the Gospels, or writing a rough draft of the Gospels, whilst Jesus is still alive, and this is nonsense. This is so silly. But is anyone calling this stuff out? I don't think so. I don't think that even many skeptics are, because I mean, to me it's just a boring, unwatchable show. So I can understand why atheists don't want to criticise this show. There are a few articles on Only Sky criticising it, but I don't think it's getting the criticism that it merits, because it is a phenomenon. And Dallas Jenkins, in my view, is a huckster, and he's also the son of a huckster. His father wrote the Left Behind series about the rapture. As St. Paul says, one day Jesus is going to float back from the sky, and we who are alive and remain. False prophecy, Paul died before Jesus came back, but we're all going to levitate up into the sky to meet Jesus in the air. Dallas Jenkins' father wrote an extremely lucrative series of books called Left Behind, and I think Jenkins is just the son of a con artist and is picking up his father's grift. If anything, The Chosen is an even more lucrative grift, and I think that The Chosen is a for-profit company. I think that Dallas Jenkins has admitted this, so he's making big money selling lies to people who don't know any better, and people who should know better, like Father James Martin, SJ, a Jesuit scholar. They aren't calling this con out, and atheists and skeptics are too bored to watch this show, so they aren't calling it out either. And it's just really bizarre. And another thing that I don't like about The Chosen is that it turns the characters in the New Testament into soap opera characters. Like all these subplots about marrying women, and I think some of the apostles are fishermen and they aren't making enough money, and Rome is taxing them too much, and and again, we are meant to care about all this stuff, but I really don't care. I didn't tune in to watch a soap opera. I came in to watch something about the life of Jesus, and so it's a really bizarre show, and it just speaks to the lack of religious knowledge that people are buying this stuff. Like, they are literally buying this stuff and making the likes of Dallas Jenkins into extremely rich men. And I mean, if people knew a bit more, then this hucksterism, it wouldn't be successful. But as somebody says, nobody has ever lost money by underestimating the stupidity of the general public. There are millions and millions and millions of people who have a pre-enlightenment view of the Bible. Prior to Spinoza, the Bible was the word of God, and everything that happened in it was true, and all the traditional authors were the people who actually wrote this book. Moses wrote the Pentateuch, Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew, John wrote the Gospel of John, but beginning with Spinoza, all of these incorrect beliefs were slowly got rid of by the educated elite, by people who could read, by people who could study, by people with rationality, and this was really the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment. Spinoza was excommunicated from his synagogue for beginning this process of Bible criticism and Bible deconstruction. However, as McKinsey put it, I can't think of his name, but he wrote Encyclopedia of Biblical Errancy. I think Dennis McKinsey. Most people are actually still in the Dark Ages. Most people have a pre-Spinozan view of the Bible, and the target demographic of the chosen is people who are still in the Dark Ages, who have a pre-Spinozan view of the Bible. And the success of this show just goes to show most of us are still in the Dark Ages. There are only a few of us who have enlightened ourselves in the Spinozan tradition, in the tradition of Spinoza, Paine, David Hume. Millions upon millions of people are still medieval, really, in mindset. This was one of Dennis McKinsey's talking points, and I'm sure he would have a lot to say about the chosen if he was still alive. Okay, I think that I've given my first impressions on the chosen.